Before tonight's show begins, we need to acknowledge the untimely and horrific passing of activist Regan Russell at Fairman Slaughterhouse on Friday 19th of June 2020. If you're struggling with this horrific event, please reach out to someone to talk. And please now join us in observing 2 minutes of silence, because 2 minutes to bear witness to slaughterhouse victims is all that Regan ever peacefully asked for from the trucks. Our hearts go out to her close friends and family.
Hello everyone, welcome to Liberation Hour Radio. I'm your host Varun, and today we have John Oberg on our show. Hello John, thanks so much for coming to our show.
Hey Varun, it's really an honor to be here with Liberation Hour Radio. I think that the work you all do for animals is really inspiring, and it's great to be here with you.
Thanks so much. So for those of you who don't know, John Oberg is an animal activist and social media influencer and professional, dedicated to making the world a kinder place for animals by utilizing the power of social media. In 2019, he launched his own independent Patreon-funded project for animals through Patreon to maximize his impact for animals. Previously, he served as Director of New Media for the International Animal Protection Organization, the Humane League, and as Director of Communications for Vegan Outreach. In 2019, he had over 200 million impressions of his content on social media. So today, we'll be learning a lot from John. So before we get started, John, how did it all start? Like, how did you become vegan?
For me, there was a variety of things that happened throughout my life. I had a very close relationship with animals because my mom was my best friend, and so her and I would rescue animals. We would spend time with animals. We would spay and neuter and then release animals. We'd rescue them, and so my mom really taught me to be compassionate towards animals, and that they really needed us to be kind to them, to consider their feelings. And so my mom and I shared this bond, which really made a big impact on me. I was backpacking in Europe in 2008, so I guess it's about 12 years ago, and I met this guy in Finland who was selling reindeer meat, prepared reindeer meat. And I want you to keep in mind that I loved animals my whole life, but I always was eating animals. I really didn't see the connection between the animals on my plate and the animals that I considered, deserving of my consideration and compassion. And I really didn't see the connection there. And so I was in Finland in 2008, and this guy was selling reindeer meat at an open air market in downtown Helsinki, Finland. And we got to talking, and he understood that I was on a really tight budget. I was trying to spend like, I don't know, $8 a day or something. So I was eating nothing but like bread and Nutella or something back then. And so he's like, hey man, come back at 5 o'clock when I'm shutting down, and I'll give you whatever's left over. So I came back at 5 o'clock, and he gave me pounds and pounds and pounds of prepared reindeer meat, literally like probably 150, 200 euros worth of reindeer meat. And he threw it into a garbage bag, which I then slung over my shoulder like I was Santa Claus. And he and I just started chatting, and he's like, oh, let's hang out for a little bit. So we decided to take a walk to the library nearby. And on this walk to the library, he's talking about the things that he's interested in. He talks about how he's an activist, and his particular form of activism wasn't necessarily something that interested me, but I took the opportunity to tell him I wanted to be an I wanted to be an activist too. And he said, oh, what kind of activist do you want to be? And I said, oh, I want to be an animal activist. He stops, he looks at me in the eye, and he says, if you want to be an animal activist, you should probably stop eating them and carrying around, reindeer meat filled sacks over your shoulder. And I had never once made the connection up until that moment between myself loving animals and then the animals that I was consuming. And so that was like the final straw that did it for me. So that is what inspired me to go vegetarian based on the principle that, if I love animals, I shouldn't be consuming animals. And then as I continued being vegetarian, I watched 10 months after going vegetarian, I watched a film called Earthlings, which was narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, who recently won Best Oscar for his role in Joker. And so I went vegan after learning how dairy cows and egg-laying hens were treated, but also how factory farming is horrible for all animals from birth to death. I went vegetarian on this principle that animals deserve our protection or deserve not to be eaten, but I didn't know anything about how animals are actually being raised. So once I learned, I said, okay, I'm done going vegan, becoming an activist.
That's a really unique story. Like, you hear, stories of other vegans, they talk about they just watched something and, they came across this video, but it's like it took a non-vegan to convince you that, that the animals you're eating, like, you shouldn't be eating them if you want to be an activist.
That's actually kind of funny. I had never thought about that, how it was a non-vegan who convinced me to go vegan. That is kind of ironic.
Yeah. So now that you're not just a vegan, you also advocate for it. Why is it important for you? Why do you think it's important that we advocate for veganism?
And so it's very important that we become activists or incorporate activism into our lives, because being vegan is great and all, but essentially in terms of suffering, you're a net neutral, right? You're no longer causing more harm to animals, but you're also not preventing harm. And so by influencing other people to stop eating animals and to become vegan, you are reducing suffering. And the beautiful thing about social media and other forms of activism is that each one of us can have a huge, huge impact for animals just by utilizing these tools at our fingertips well.
Absolutely. You made a really good point about how people believe that they care about animals. They'll even go out of the way to rescue dogs and cats or squirrels. Like, even my story, before I went vegan, well, I was a vegetarian, but I used to rescue cats, dogs, and other animals. But I didn't make the connection that, every day my choices, whether to consume dairy or buy, products made from animal skin, I was contributing to such horrific violence against the animal. So I think once I made that connection, it just all made sense that, you shouldn't be doing that. And going vegan and, advocating for animal liberation is the way to go if you really believe that animals should be cared for, animals deserve respect. In January 2019, you had like a Twitter interaction with Piers Morgan. and it started off with, him when he was just crying about vegan sausages, vegan sausage rolls, and basically posted, quote, "Just order a large sausage roll on room service, a meat one, real meat one. The vegan resistance starts here." And then he responded, "Hey Pierce, I'd like to thank you for bringing more awareness to vegan eating, the plight of today's farm animals, and making us realize that we have made it further on the path of progress for animals, since resistance is a prime indicator of this." How did it all
Yeah.
all go? Like, I heard you got lots and lots of retweets, and yeah, it was even.
Yeah, Varun, that was an interesting experience. Greg's, which is a very popular market in the UK, began offering vegan sausage rolls just before he tweeted this, and Piers Morgan was very upset about it and talked about the vegan resistance, how it starts there. So I am a firm believer in when people are talking about resisting veganism, that means that, hey, we're on the map. Even if it deals with a little bit of resistance, that means we are relevant as a movement. And of course we're relevant as a movement. It's common sense to have compassion for animals and not to cause unnecessary harm and suffering and cruelty to them. So that was pretty fun. So Pierce tweeted this. I thought it was pretty ridiculous. And so I replied to his tweet. And then my reply ended up getting a lot of engagement. So a lot of people were liking and commenting and replying to me. And then Pierce replied to me, actually. And then I replied to him. So we carried on the conversation for a few tweets back and forth. And I later found out that my tweet had been shared in an article about Pierce's upset or about his outrage about this vegan roll. And that's something that all vegan activists can do, right? We can take advantage of social media to really shine a light on animal abuse, but shine a light on, the greatness of vegan eating, for example. And entering into dialogue is a fantastic way of doing that. And what's really amazing about Twitter and other social media platforms is it's sort of democratized communication with the world. We can now communicate with anyone, anywhere in the world like that, with just simply going to their profile, replying to their tweet, or tweeting at them. And there's, of course, other ways to communicate as well. And so I was fortunate enough to have this quick dialogue with him, and I think it led to, hopefully some hearts and minds being won over.
Absolutely. And yeah, it is resistance. We are resisting animal oppression. So you can be mad about it.
Right.
So I'll now get into the specifics of, strategizing your tactics to reach a wider audience on social media. So it's really important that we have a lot of followers if you want to reach them. What is the best way to increase the number of your followers on different social media platforms?
Yeah, so what's interesting is, a lot of activists are very humble creatures, right? And so we're not necessarily thinking about, how do we get more popular? How do we get more followers? But the fact of the matter is, more followers means more people who are seeing your content. And so therefore, it's very important that more people are understanding or more people are able to share your posts. And so more followers means more eyeballs on your content, which means more shares of your posts, which means more non-vegans seeing your posts, which means more animals protected and saved as a result. So having more and more following is important for that reason. There's a variety of tactics out there as far as getting more followers, but really most of it boils down to two things. And one is have good content. So post good content that people care about, content that people are interested in, whether it's undercover footage from a factory farm, or happy footage from an animal sanctuary, or your own origin story as an activist, or any, the great vegan food that you're cooking. Whatever it is, post good content and pay attention to whether or not it's performing well. So spend some time looking at your own social media platform. Go back a few months, a few years, and see, okay, what resonated with my audience and what didn't. and learn from there. And as you post more and more good content, more and more people will choose to follow you. And then, of course, the second part of gaining a new following is through shares. And so you really want people to be sharing your content, particularly if you think about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as the big three. Facebook and Twitter allow you to very easily share people's content. Facebook has the share button, Twitter has the retweet button. And these functions provide an amazing opportunity to amplify your message. So in 2019, on Twitter, I had 120 million impressions of my tweets. Now I don't have 120 million followers. I have about 83,000 followers. And so of that 83,000 followers, like many of them have chosen to retweet my content. And then their followers and other people who've seen those tweets have chosen to retweet these tweets. And it goes further and further and further. And so it's very important to gain, one of the ways to gain new followers is by getting people to share these new tweets or these new posts of yours.
Yeah, content is really important. Like when I was doing my course in social media, I learned we have to be really careful, like how many words we are using, what kind of content we're publishing. So when it comes to promoting animal rights and veganism, what should be the length and what kind of content should be posted? Because I sometimes see like pages posting like really lengthy descriptions, and to be honest, I don't want to go over each and everything that's shared. What I do like is when something is like really simple and short, so you can just like read it and then form your opinion. So when it comes to promoting veganism, what kind of content should we post, and what length?
For captions, I specifically think about, I have an 80-20 rule, okay? So 80% of my posts, I try to keep very short and brief captions. For 20% of my posts, I try and go longer form, maybe multiple paragraphs. And the reason for this is because people have very short attention spans on social media. If you don't believe me, just watch a friend or loved one scroll through their newsfeed on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. It is truly astonishing how quickly they go from post to post to post. They are not spending much time on each post. And so they are hardly even reading a few words, let alone multiple paragraphs. But that being said, there is a time and place for longer paragraphs, and some content certainly reaches people in a different way. If you're talking about your origin story, that's a great opportunity to do maybe a few paragraphs about it, to talk, to really get people to feel emotionally connected to you as an activist, and to understand your path and to understand why animal issues should be taken more seriously. As far as what kind of content to post, I'm a firm believer in posting different types of content, both in actual media form, so going from photo to video to link to text only to polls, but then also in the emotional content. So maybe happy, sad, funny, educational, news content, having a mix of all of these things so that you're not just, doing the same thing over and over and boring your audience.
Yeah, because there are some pages I come across that only post like graphic content, and you just want to unfollow. Yeah, there's importance of posting graphic content because people need to know what's happening to animals, but then also we need to show the happy side of animals so people are able to relate to them as free beings.
Exactly, Varun. If we focus all of our energy on just sad content, you reach a point of diminishing returns very quickly, and people will start to turn you off. They are not going to tune you out. They are not going to want to see that every day, day in, day out. But the same goes for happy content as well. Like, you don't want to bore your audience. You want to provide them an interesting stream of content that always leaves them guessing as to what's coming next.
For sure. My next question is about increasing the video views. Sometimes you post videos on social media. Sometimes you get lots of views, surprisingly, like thousands. And then there are times you just get like 100, 200. how to make sure that the videos that you're sharing get maximum views?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things that I try to do is basically just constantly look at my own social media presence and see what works and see what doesn't work. What a lot of social media consultants out there won't tell you is that much of social media is simply throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. It's experimenting. It's trying new things and seeing what is working for your audience and what isn't working for your audience. So for me, I'm constantly toying with that. I'm paying attention to what's working and what's not. What I've found is that video clips are generally shorter the better, especially for like happy content. So like if it's an animal playing in a sanctuary, like a clip that's 5-7 seconds is totally fine. If it's more like cruel content, maybe like undercover footage of a factory farm or a slaughterhouse, I might go a little bit longer on video length. And then there's some videos that I understand might not get as much content or as many views and as much engagement, but it's still overall very important that I incorporate this. So for example, there are some videos of me speaking about activism, and I understand that that might not get as much interest from my audience as maybe a video of an animal, but it's still very important to incorporate into my social media strategy because getting the animal protection movement to take their social media game more seriously and to talk to them about being more effective as advocates is something that's very important to me and important to my mission and my journey. And so, granted, sometimes I may get less engagement on certain types of posts. If it's important, I'm still going to include it.
Absolutely. So one thing I learned when I was doing my new media marketing course is that it's really important to engage with your audience, to interact with them, to respond to them, to make them feel special that they are following you, and to humanize your presence on social media, because sometimes you often see pages that just post content and then their comments and never get back to those comments. So it's just like, very robotic. How do you make sure, how do you manage to deal with engage with your audience and, make them feel that they are heard and they are included in your, social media?
Social media is so much more than just posting. A lot of people have this idea that social media is about posting something and then logging off and not logging back on until the next day until it's time to post something again. That is not what it is about. If that is what the approach you're taking, it's a huge missed opportunity. So much of social media is engaging with your audience and with people who aren't part of your audience. It's engaging with people out there doing outreach on social media. And so if people are taking the time to reply to one of your tweets or to add a comment to one of your Instagram posts, take the time out of your day to at least like that comment or reply back to it. Maybe carry on the conversation or express your gratitude for the comments that they've made. And this is good for a few reasons. For one, it's a polite thing to do. They took time out of their day to do this. And as Canadians, I'm sure you appreciate that. Some of the most polite people I know. And then also the fact is you want to get people to feel like they will continue commenting in the future. And this is a way to kind of have them continue feeling positive about this and like it's something that they should continue doing. And then of course the third most important aspect of replying to comments and engaging is the fact that social media platforms actually prioritize posts in news feeds that are creating conversation. And so if you can create some dialogue in the comments section, that is telling Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that this is a conversation worth sharing to other people. And so more and more people should be seeing this content. And so that's actually like a side benefit to do this, to engaging with the comments.
Exactly. Instagram is getting really popular among the youth and even other older generations. But the problem with Instagram is that it does not allow you to share the way Twitter and Facebook do, and also you cannot post a text. You have to add a media like a photo or video. So when it comes to Instagram, it is slightly different doing activism. How do you use Instagram for reaching your audience, and what kind of content do you use for Instagram?
That's a great point, and it's worth mentioning and talking about because a lot of activists go right to the platform that they're most comfortable with and that they enjoy the most. And for me, I definitely enjoy using Instagram more than I enjoy using other platforms, but the value isn't there for me as much as it is with Facebook or Twitter. And so a lot of activists fall into this trap where they just go where they're most comfortable. And the unfortunate aspect of Instagram, as far as activism goes, is that there's no share function. And as animal liberation activists, we know that it's very important that our content is seen far and wide, particularly by people who don't follow us already. And so there's some ways to get your content in the news feeds of other people, but it's not simple. And most of your content is going to be seen mostly by people who already have opted into following you. That does prevent an alternative form of activism, though, however, and that is an ability to speak to people who have already chosen to follow you. So on Twitter and Facebook, for example, I understand that the vast majority of views of my content are actually from non-vegans. So I talked earlier about how I had 120 million impressions on Twitter in 2019. Well, of those 120 million impressions, I would guess that 110 million of those impressions are from individuals who are not vegan. And so obviously I'm not going to be screaming go vegan, go vegan, go vegan in every single message, because if so, I'm not going to be reaching those numbers. On Instagram, however, my profile is very clearly I'm a vegan activist, and so most of the people who choose to follow me are fellow vegan activists. So this provides a different opportunity. I use Instagram as an opportunity to speak largely to vegan activists out there about how they can be more effective vegan advocates. Currently, and this is subject to change at some point, but currently 1/3 of my posts are videos of me talking where I'm strictly talking about how to become, how to be as effective as we can as activists. And I feel like 1/3 of my posts is an acceptable amount for my audience, or for my audiences here. And then 1/3 of my content is animal related content, whether photos or videos, happy or sad. And then 1/3 is just miscellaneous. So I have some flexibility in there.
For sure. Instagram, Facebook, and even now YouTube also has this feature, like the story feature. How do you use it, and what's the most effective way to use it to spread the message?
For a long time, the talk of the town in terms of social media advocates and social media professionals was that video was the future of social media. And I still believe that video is playing a really big role. But what I believe today is that stories are the future of social media. And stories came as a result, Instagram stories came as a result in response to Snapchat. Snapchat was eating into Instagram's profits. And so Instagram developed Instagram stories to compete with Snapchat. And what this stories content is, for your listeners who don't know, is that it's essentially ephemeral content that only lasts for 24 hours and then it disappears. And it's comprised of multiple frames. It could be as little as 1 frame, but a good story is, I would say, 3 to 5 frames, a blend of photo and or videos and or boomerangs and other kinds of content as well, and that are kind of all working together, talking about one particular thing. So if you're at the gym, you might take a video of you talking to the camera as you're walking into the gym, then a few photos and videos and boomerangs of you doing workouts, and then maybe like a photo or a video of you sweaty at the end, saying like it was a great workout. Like that's an example of a story. Okay, so that's what stories are. So a little bit more about a history of stories. So Instagram stories came out initially. Everybody is like, we don't need Instagram stories. We already have Snapchat for that kind of content. Well, the funny thing about social media is that people don't like to leave platforms, okay? They don't like to leave one app and go to another. And so people just started using Snapchat or Instagram stories more and more in replacement of Snapchat. And so other companies have gotten on board. Facebook now often offers stories. YouTube now does. And Twitter is even experimenting with a form of stories. I think it's called fleets. So they're experimenting with those, I believe, in Brazil right now. So I think it's only a matter of time before it's also there. So stories is this unique way of interacting with your audience in a very authentic, very low produced way. So, you're not posting highly glossy, highly produced videos on your stories. It's more of like an intimate connection with your audience. And public figures and celebrities have done a really fantastic job of utilizing this, giving people more behind the scenes access to how they are living from day to day, rather than just seeing glossy photos of them on the red carpet. And so stories is vital. And so if you're on Instagram, don't just focus on newsfeed posting. Also think about your activity on stories. If you're on Facebook, start implementing stories into this, and then keep an eye on it on Twitter and YouTube and elsewhere, because I think that stories really is the future.
I agree. And what I really like about story is that you don't have to, separately post stories on different platforms. For instance, if you're on both Instagram and Facebook and your accounts are connected, you can just post on Instagram and it'll automatically go to your Facebook if you don't want to post separate stories.
Yeah. I do have a belief that, we should post natively whenever possible, but I think that there's enough overlap between Instagram stories and Facebook stories that you can get away with posting the same content from there to there.
Absolutely. I came across this post on Instagram about a pig in transport truck who was given water by an activist. And then when you swipe right, you see one more photo of that same pig, but in a portrait form. Someone painted that. And then third photo of a tattoo of that same picture. How did that all happen?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Varun, because that was a really special thing that happened. So I lived in Los Angeles for 2 years. I moved away about a year and a half ago, and I really enjoyed my time there. And one of the things that I did when I was living in Los Angeles was I would regularly go to these animal save vigils. So Los Angeles animal save vigils, which were held every week, often several times a week. I would often go on their Sunday evening ones at Farmer John's Slaughterhouse in downtown Los Angeles. And it's truly remarkable that they have a slaughterhouse right in downtown Los Angeles. So I would attend these vigils where there would be dozens, sometimes hundreds of activists outside these slaughterhouses. And fortunately, Los Angeles Animal Save and their amazing organizer there, Amy Jean Davis, formed a agreement with these trucks where they would stop for 2 to 3 minutes outside of the slaughterhouse before entering. And some activists would give these pigs water. Some activists would take photos and videos to amplify these animals' voices. So Lindsey is one of the most prolific artists in the animal rights movement. Lindsey Lewis, she's an amazing person. And so we went there, and a pig was sticking their snout out of the holes in the side of the truck, and she rested her hand against the snout of the pig to comfort it, or to comfort them in some of their final moments of life. And I snapped a photo of that, and she loved the photo. And so what she did was she drew a portrait of that photo, and then posted it online. And what her and I were amazed to discover was that someone was so inspired by that portrait that they actually got that tattooed on their bodies. So someone out there has a tattoo of a portrait of a photo that I took of Lindsey touching this pig in their final moments. And it really means a lot to me. It really shows the power of social media and the power of activism, how much of an impact that we can make.
That's really incredible. And what I find really interesting about those vigils are those final movements are like, they can't be compared with anything, like so powerful. Did you ever get to connect with a person who got that tattoo?
No, I don't know them personally. Which, I mean, I think that just shows that the impact that we have is far and wide, and that as activists, we will only ever see the tip of the iceberg in terms of the impact that we're making for animals. We will rarely ever really know or hear about the actual impact that each one of us have made. So I think the fact that I have no clue who this person is speaks to the volume of the impactful legacy of advocacy, particularly through social media.
What is the best way to publicize your events on social media so that we have more and more people joining us?
Yeah, getting people to come out to in-person events is a very important aspect of our advocacy. And I think after the COVID-19 lockdowns eventually end, I think that will put more of an emphasis on online communication, which is fantastic and allows us to open our doors to more and more people. But when we do want to focus on in-person activism and getting people to come out to events such as vigils, there are a variety of tactics that we can take. So for one, we absolutely want to make sure we have Facebook event pages created. Facebook has its downsides, but it also has its upsides. And one of the upsides is the fact that Facebook event pages are, the place to go for any event nowadays. And so if you're going to have an event, have a Facebook event page created for it. Even if it's a digital event, people have Facebook event pages for it. So make sure you have a Facebook event page for every event that you're talking about. Make sure you are maximizing your invitations, so inviting a lot of people, but doing it in waves. So starting out first with the people who are most likely to attend, and then ending maybe 3 to 5 waves of invitations later with people who are less likely to attend. And that way, these people who are less likely to attend are, one, going to see that there are many more people who are already RSVP'd, but then also there's a higher likelihood that they've seen that they actually know some of those individuals who have RSVP'd. So that's some of the ways to do it. And of course, just having a good social media presence overall gives you a louder voice and gives you more followers to reach out to get people to come out and take part in your activism.
So before we end, what are some final words you would like to share with the audience?
Well, something that every activist out there needs to remember is that one of the most powerful tools in their toolbox is social media. And while you probably are on social media and you talk about activism on social media, maybe you aren't thinking deeply about how your presence is on social media and the impact that you can have. But I promise you, the impact that you're having now can be amplified magnitudes higher. It can be exponentially increased if you use social media well, if you use social media wisely. And should anybody want to get involved with my work, they can support my work at patreon.com/John Oberg. And in addition to supporting the work that I'm doing for animals, they can also get materials in exchange for becoming a patron of mine. Social media, in terms of resources that will help them become better advocates using social media.
For sure. Thank you so much for coming tonight to our show. It was my privilege to have you and learn so much about using social media effectively. And hopefully people who are watching us have learned a lot, which they will be using while advocating for animals on social media.
Varun, it was a real honor to be on Liberation Hour Radio with you and to spend some time talking about the importance of advocating for animals and to amplifying our voice to the maximum potential that we have. So thank you for the work that you're doing for animals. We are absolutely in this journey together. Let's do this.
Thank you so much. We will see you next week at 8 p.m. EST. See you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Just a couple of quick announcements to wrap things up. Please join Nation Rising on Saturday, June 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern via Zoom for an interactive show where you can hear incredible speakers weigh in on the current state of the world, the need to end government subsidies to animal agriculture, and how we can create a just transition for farmers. Check out their Facebook or their website for further details. Also, Kitchener-Waterloo Veg Fest is the weekend after that. Thank you.
Join in on Saturday and Sunday, July 4th and 5th, with vendor spotlights leading up to the event on the week before. Do you have questions about a plant-based diet? check out our health panel Sunday afternoon with Dr. Neil Barnard from the American Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, as well as a vegan and Ontario-based pediatrician, cardiologist, and naturopath. Want to learn some new tricks in the kitchen? Some well-known local chefs will show you how it's done in our cooking demos. Watch for the Viet Vegan, Jack Middleton, Halal Foods, a cooking demo for kids, Food Not Bombs, and more. Also, farm animal sanctuary tours, a primate sanctuary, zero waste demos, a bike tour expert. We've got it all. And don't miss our fabulous vendors for their special offers. Plant-based ice cream and cheeses, pet foods, local restaurants, bath and body products, clothes, and much more. Also, you can sign up for our 2-day KW Love the Planet Challenge and go plant-based, carb-free, and plastic-free. Find KW Veg Fest on Facebook, Instagram, and our website, and don't miss out.